Alrighty, so good afternoon, everyone. So as Ashley said, today we're going to be going over session 2, which is focusing on managing finances. So today we're going to be going over 3 modules from the Your Money, Your Goals toolkit. Was everyone able to actually access the toolkit, like go on the website and either look through it or be able to order their own materials? Okay. So if you did not get a chance to do so, I would highly encourage everyone to go on the website and actually pull the material. So today we're going to be discussing saving for emergencies, your bills, and developing financial goals. So, what is saving for money? What is saving, right? Understanding your savings is you're saving for money to be able to set it aside for income that you're going to be have to use in the future. I don't know why I just got tongue tied. I'm sorry. So, when you are meeting with your participants, one of the things you're going to have to explain to them is the purpose of saving. So, saving for me could be different for saving for you and vice versa. But there are 3 main things that we encourage everyone to save for. And it's, of course, first and foremost, saving for emergencies and disasters, then saving for unexpected costs, and then leisure and enjoyment. Most people think that a savings account is just like that. It's a savings account. It's another checking account. And most people actually treat it as a second checking account. So the purpose of you actually explaining why you're doing these and attaching these things to it will help them try to not touch it because it's set aside for a purpose instead of it just being set aside. Okay, so what happens when you create a savings account? So today I'm going to be using a lot of examples from clients that I work with, because the purpose of this webinar and me going through this is that you'll actually be sitting down with your participants, being able to walk them through these exercises that are in those packets. Or maybe if you don't use the packets, these are just going to be some useful tips to be able to have these conversations. And the main thing about these conversations are making it relatable to whatever their current situations are or things that they can experience. One of the things I see a lot is that we fail to make it relatable when we're talking to people. And so they think that either the advice you're giving them is outrageous or it's outlandish or it could never fit their situation. So one of the things you explain when you're telling them, hey, we should start a savings, it's planning for the unexpected. And perfect example, I had 3 clients go through this last week where they had unexpected expenses come up. One of my clients, her air conditioner went out in her house. One of my other clients, her engine in her car went out. And then I had another client who went to go pay a bill that she thought was going to be $25 because she was just doing a registration with her car. And then come to find out she had a bill that she did not know about that totaled $330. And all of those situations were unexpected, but our goal as the financial consultants, as the person that they're looking to for advice, is to not only prepare them for those situations. So, prepare means making it a reality that this could happen. There's a lot of people who think this can't happen to me or that can't happen to me. At least once or twice a year, we all go through an unexpected expense that's usually huge. Last year, mine was a refrigerator and a stove back to back. And so we all go through these things and we have to be prepared for it. And our main goal is to make sure that we prepare them for it up front, that this can happen, so that way when it does happen, they don't freak out and they don't think that the world is over. And then the other thing we do when we're creating these savings plans is being able to show them what type of, like, what money you can use for unexpected issues. So, like my example of me having to buy a refrigerator and a stove back to back. When I had to purchase the refrigerator, as you could see from this little chart, I was in the emergency, I was able to use my emergency fund to be able to do that. So with my emergency fund, I didn't have any interest, which is the APR, no repayment terms unless I want to repay myself. So no interest, no fees, no time to repay. And that allowed me to just pay for the refrigerator out of pocket, right? But then I come back and I have to pay for a stove now. And so for the stove, unfortunately, I wasn't willing to take that one on out of my emergency fund after I just took out of my emergency fund. So I went with the credit card. And as you can see for this example, like the credit card, I took into consideration that I would be paying interest, that I will be taking on a monthly bill. And I took all of that into consideration. And I was willing to pay an extra $40 as like this example. I would be willing to pay that extra $40 just to say that I didn't have to take it out of my emergency fund, because if anything else pops up, at least I have the cash to be able to do it. And now, one of the reasons why you present these three options to your participants is because there are some emergencies that require liquid assets, which is your cash. So you can't always say, oh, I'll use my cash for every emergency. But you can't always say, I'll use my credit card for different emergencies. So it's just being able to identify which emergencies come up and what type of unexpected things that can happen. If this happens, what can you use to pay for it, and vice versa. So, developing and defining goals. So, after you have explained the importance of a savings account, you've kind of explained the unexpected things that could happen. The next part of saving is actually defining the different type of goals that you want to be able to aim for. So the type of goals make a difference between the amount that you're going to save, the amount of time it'll take, what the outcome could be, and also with developing your strategy. And so I have a client who wants to buy a house, but in between the process of her buying a house, she wants to also go on like 3 vacations. And so when we're coming up with her strategy, I'm telling her to take into consideration that vacations cost money, money that'll be taken away from our ultimate goal, which means your outcome and your timing of being able to complete this is going to keep getting pushed back. So when you're having these conversations, you always let them tell you all the goals that they have. And I say that because I never want someone to get in front of me and limit themselves and not tell me everything that they want to do, because if they tell me everything they want to do, we can figure out a way for it to be done. Versus if we make it seem like, oh, that's not right, that's not, like, you don't need to do that, then they'll eventually falter on whatever goals it is that they have created, because they didn't tell you about that. And in their mind, in their situation, they're still going to want to do it or need to do it. So now they have to create a compromise. So it's easier for you to take everything in and you all work on a plan to try and make everything work, if that's how you work with your participants. If not, just telling them, just say everything, because that way, once you say everything, then you can work through, well, this may not work, or this may not work. So on this screen, you see an example of someone who wants to save $1,000 in 10 months. So that means that they'll save $100 a month, and we'll get into more details about this, the last two, but the strategies for saving, like being able to cut back on some of your monthly expenses, and then the place where you'll save it. So are you going to be saving it in a bank or saving it with a friend? So we'll talk more about those two options in detail in a second. Um, and then the other piece of it is making sure, if you do have these long-term relationships with your participants where they come back and they do check-ins, how will you measure success? And how will you measure and acknowledge setbacks? So with my clients, even though we have, like, say if this was my client and we had an overall 10-month goal of $1,000. Well, with that 10-month goal of $1,000, I'm not gonna wait until I'm not gonna wait until the 10 months are over to where I say, hey, congratulations, you made it to $1,000. Because saving $1,000 for most people, including myself, is hard when you have daily things that you want to do. So that month, every month, I would be congratulating them, giving them their accolades to measure their success, because that will allow them to continue moving forward. They're going to be excited. Like, I have a client right, we are 2 months away from her meeting $2,000 in her savings account. When I first met her, she could barely get to 1,000. Now we're almost at 2,000. But I don't congratulate her. I'm not gonna wait to congratulate her till we hit 2,000. Even when she put $50 in this month, I'm like, yes, like, we're closer. So I'm encouraging her the entire time. The flip side of that is that we also have to hold them accountable when they have setbacks. So again, with this same client, she also went over her food budget that I gave her, and she was only supposed to spend $200, and she spent $400 in a 2-week span. And so I did lightly let her know that, hey, this is setting us back. This was money that was expected to be saved, going toward this goal that you have and that goal that you have. And it's refreshing because she pointed out what her issues were. She pointed out what trends she saw that she had, and she was like, okay, this is what I need to do to adjust, and I'm reaching out to you for the support and the help. So if you attack them from that way, not necessarily attacking, but if you approach it from that standpoint of, hey, what do you see you're doing wrong that's stopping us from being able to reach these goals? More than likely, they know their trends, they know their behaviors, and it's just a matter of you being able to help them stay accountable to whatever goal it is that they have. Okay. So as we talked about in the last session, just consider this tool when you're working with clients, being able to use the SMART goals, of course, because that's how you pretty much can help them stay on track and measure their progress. So finding safe places for your money. So we tend to go through, oh, I'm sorry. We tend to go through this a lot, where you'll hear people who say, hey, I'm going to keep my money at home because I don't trust a bank. I don't know which bank to go to. I don't know this and I don't know that. So when it comes down to explaining to your participants where they should save their money, have those conversations for them and give them the pros and the cons. If you say that you want to leave it at your house, okay, you're right. It's no cost, it's easy to access, it's convenient. But On the flip side, it can be lost, stolen, or destroyed. It might put you at risk for a home evasion, like this says. But one of the other things I would add to that is that I would actually say the one of the risks is a convenience, because if the money is available, readily available for you, then who's to say you're not going to touch it? And then the same issues you would go through with leaving it with a friend or a family member. There's no guarantee they'll give it back to you either. So being making sure you're taking all of those things into account. So one of the things that I recommend to people is, if you don't feel like the big bank is for you, go to a credit union. They're local. This is what they're built for. The only thing you might the only issue you might run into is accessibility as far as ATMs go. So, but at the same time, that's a good deterrent. It's a savings account. It's not meant for you to be readily. It's not meant for it to be readily available to you. And then the other thing I recommend is that you don't have your savings account at the same place that you have your checking account. Because again, with online transfers and all of that stuff, it's easy for you to, if I have a Chase checking and I have a Chase savings, in 2 seconds, I can take money out of my savings account and put it in my checking account. And so I don't have to really stop and think about that decision. Versus if you put it in a location in another bank, like, so for me, for instance, my savings account is with Navy Federal. And if you all are familiar with New Orleans and where Navy Federal is located, it takes a lot for me to convince myself to go and drive to Navy Federal to pull money out of my savings account, because I purposefully did not open a checking account, because that would make it too easy for me to access that money. And so that time that would lapse, it really would make me think about the decision. Do I really need this money, or am I making it an emergency in my head when it's really not an emergency? And are there other things that I could do besides accessing my savings account? And so that's a great deterrent that I've found for people. But at the end of the day, if it's a true emergency, time and travel won't matter. But that's a way to determine if it's really a true um, emergency. So if you are working with clients, if you have 10-minute sessions with them, you can just go over a savings plan, what it's for, why would you actually have it. If you have 30 minutes with them, then you can go over the goal setting and asset limitations, meaning, do you use cash versus credit card versus a payday loan? And if you have multiple sessions where you're meeting with them and you are kind of their like accountability partner, then you can go over the financial management and money diversification. So before I move on to the next module, does anyone have any questions? Okay, if it cooperates. Okay, so in module 3, we're going to be talking about tracking and managing income benefits. And one of the reasons we're going over this is because a lot of people don't actually understand or look at their paycheck stubs, because everything is done electronically now. Most people just get direct deposit, and if they're mailed a paycheck stub, they probably never open it. If the paycheck stub is available online in a system, they've probably never accessed it. And I deal with both all the time, to where I'll ask a client, hey, how much do you make? They're like, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, that might be the first start of our problem. So when you're talking income to people, to your participants, there's usually 4 different sources. So you have their regular income, which is their 9-to-5 job. Then you have irregular income, and that could be from any type of activity. Then you have, so that could fall under like child support payments, like any type of social security, disability, anything like that that's not technically something you're earning. Then you have the seasonal, which is, hey, I just got a part-time job for the Christmas season, or for New Year's, and after that it's done. And then you have that one-time occurrence, which usually my example of that is like a tax refund or something like that. It comes once a year. It's not something you should count on. So usually when I am meeting with people and I'm determining what their actual income is for the month, I look at seasonal income and one time occurrences as lanyard money because it's not something you can depend on. So, my definition of income is a constant, stable resource that is consistently coming in. One time and seasonal should not be counted toward those because, as I said, it's not stable. So you don't want to help someone start developing a financial plan or a budget utilizing those numbers when there's no guarantee they will get those numbers again. And then the other benefits, the other things that you want to look at when you are helping them determine their benefit, I mean, their income, is looking at if they are actually taken out of their check for medical and life insurance policies, if they have retirement coming out, and if they have disability coming out. Because if they don't have these three things set up personally, at the very least, you would want it set up through your job. Most jobs nowadays offer a 401k or a 403b or a 457 plan where they can save for retirement. Most jobs, some jobs now, I won't say all jobs anymore, some jobs offer medical and life insurance policies, and even some to the point where if you leave them, you can keep your policies. And then the same is with disability as well. If something happens to you and you're not able to work, having these policies will cover you. So, but these are the things that you'll find out when you look on the paycheck stub, which, as I said, most people don't check. So, when it comes down to this, the main questions you want to ask is, how do I get this income? So this opens up the question, as we talked about last week, with if they're getting direct deposit or if they're getting paper checks. How inconvenient is it if you're getting a paper check versus direct deposit? Being able to show them an opportunity to help make life easier for them. And then what benefits am I afforded? So as I said, if they're getting life insurance, medical, if they are offered any discounts, like some jobs have um, cell phone plan percentages that you can. So I know for LCMC, because Toro, all of those people, they have like a 25% discount with AT&T. If you have them, you can get that on your plan and get 25% off. So what type of benefits does your job offer outside of the normal things that you see on a paycheck stub? And then what risk comes along with this form of income? So for this particularly pertains to the self-employment piece or the irregular um, one-time and seasonal piece. And that's mainly because most people who are self-employed, they get in positions where they are accepting cash and they don't have a way of tracking that cash. They don't want to be, they want to be more liquid than having a tracking system. But the only problem with that is you open yourself up to audit and possibly owing the IRS. I have two clients right now who one of them owes the IRS $10,000 because he has a liquid business, meaning mostly cash transactions, and it eventually looks like tax evasion. And I have another client who is doing the same thing, who's going through the same thing. So making sure that they understand the risk that comes along with any form of income they're receiving. And then asking them, what have you learned while tracking this information? Being able to actually see where your income is coming from, and being able to say, hey, I consistently see I make $2,000, but if I do odd jobs, I can get up to 3,500. Or this week I was supposed to make this much, but I didn't. So just being able to track those things and being able to understand how to address it and how it'll benefit them. And how do they, so this is usually one of the biggest things that I deal with when people come to meet with me. How can I increase my income? So when someone asks you, how can I increase my income? You can approach it in one or two ways. You can look at one-time activities, or you can look at long-term increased income. So what does that mean? With the one-time activities, as you can see on here, for example, you can hold a yard sale or a garage sale if you have stuff to be able to sell. You can sell items online. You can try and figure out if you have any other tax credits, like any tax credits to be able to qualify, to be able to get some income coming in. And then for the regular income, it says you can seek a, a raise or additional hours at your current job. You can change your tax withholding. I've ran into a couple of clients where when we finally sat down and looked at their paycheck, some of them were single and withholding like four on their paycheck stubs and couldn't understand like why they had all of these tax burdens come tax season, or maybe they were not claiming enough. So that might be a way to tip the scales. And then it also says getting a part-time job. One of the other things that I explore with clients, which can fall under both one-time activities and regular income, is any type of interest or skill sets that they have that we can possibly convert from a one-time activity to an item that's a regular income. So like if I use myself as an example, I make sweet treats. So my sweet treats are definitely, I wouldn't even call them seasonal. Like the orders just come out the blue. People will call me and say, hey, can I have 25 of this or 50 of that? But that's a one-time activity that I could actually, if I wanted to, turn it into a regular income because the opportunity is there. And then the other thing I suggest for people who want a regular income is looking at the skill sets that they have, and it might be time for them to get a new job, to where they can actually apply the skill sets and be able to receive additional money for whatever it is that they're good at. So being able to explore other job opportunities is another way to increase income as well. So, what are the next steps? Again, if you have 10 minutes with your clients, you can go over the income tracker with them and just share with them how to be able to track their income when they have money coming in. If you have 30 minutes with them, you can do tracking of the income and benefits and how to increase income. And if you have multiple sessions, you can do all three, where you're going over the income tracker form, and then you have them, as you saw, that was a 4-week process. So you can have them actually coming in and checking in and showing you the trends that they see. And then in the meantime, you can be working on ways to increase the income. So before I move on to um, the last module, does anyone have any questions for that? Okay, so the next module is going over bill payment and managing other expenses. So this is a touchy subject, And on almost every slide, you will see the disclosure that says the perceived difference between a need and a want is extremely personal and should be approached with respect and non-judgment. When we are talking to people about money, as I said in the last session, money, like if you're looking at someone's expenses, that pretty much shows you who they are, what their life is about, and what they do. If someone is actually willing to sit with you and show you that, the one thing you have to do is be respectful and non-judgmental, because they're being vulnerable. They just open that door. So you have to approach everything with caution, because you don't want them to feel ashamed. You don't want them to run away. You want them to feel like, you know what, you also want them to be able to recognize what their trends are, what their issues are, without you pointing it out. So when you are sitting down with your clients, you will be going over their spending. And so when you're talking about spending, that goes into what their basic needs are, what their financial obligations are, and then other things they may want. So the difference between needs, wants, and obligations. Needs are things you must have to live. Wants are things you can survive without, and obligations are things you must pay because you either owe someone money or you have been ordered to pay someone money. And as I said, the big difference between a need and a want is always different for everybody. What they feel, what you think might be a want, might be a need to them. So it's just a matter of finding out their whys behind what you think a want is. So on this chart, and there are multiple budgeting charts and resources out there. You can find ones that are that you feel like could be more user friendly or people will identify better with. But one of the things that you do when you're sitting down with a client is being able to perform a spend analysis. So, what is a spend analysis? It's you getting them to tell you what they spend their money on. So, of course, they're going to come up with the basics, household things, car related things, and then groceries or different things like that. But our job when we're doing the spend analysis is to be able to dig a little deeper. We want them to be able to see different things that they do without them just thinking of the overall picture of I pay bills, I eat, I drive. So a chart like this will help them to visualize the habits as it relates to needs and wants. And this one is a daily, I'm sorry, this one is a daily chart. They have weekly ones and they have monthly ones. So you can use it to suit how you actually meet with them, if you meet weekly, if you meet monthly. And then the other thing is the categories should be created with the client and not for the client, because then that could be perceived as judgmental. If you say, oh, you don't need to go out to eat, so I'm not going to add that as a category. At the end of the day, if going out to eat is something they do, we have to address everything to be able to get them to be able to see what problems they have or what spending habits could go away. And one of the main things that I do with clients after I analyze all of their numbers is I sit down and I present it to them and I tell them, tell me, what does this mean to you? What do you see? Because at the end of the day, as professionals, we can see it all day long. But if they don't see it, then we won't ever be able to change the behavior. So, after you have looked at the numbers and you have figured out what they're spending money on, you can pretty much split it up into three categories: spending that cannot be cut, spending that can be eliminated, and spending that can be reduced. So when a client is telling you, oh, this cannot be cut. So perfect example. Um, upon meeting one of my clients, the first thing that she told me in the meeting is, if you plan on cutting my hair and my nails from getting done every 2 weeks, then we cannot work together. Even though I view that as a want, that is a need for her. So I put it in a spending that came to the compromise of putting it in to the spending that can be reduced. So we talked through different options she could have outside of spending that much money every 2 weeks, to where we compromised on once a month instead of every 2 weeks. But this is how you help change behaviors. If I would have told her that, oh, you know what, it has to go. So if it's not going to go, then I can't work with you either, then she would still be at square one. She would still be struggling. She still wouldn't be on the path to meet her goals. So I know sometimes there are things that we're like, oh, you should just do it. We have to meet them where they are, and we have to be able to walk with them where we need them to be. But again, mainly we need them to be able to see it. So if something falls into the cannot be cut category and you feel as though it's a want, have that conversation. Try to find out why they feel as though it can't be cut. And 9 times out of 10, it's usually always a mental issue, not necessarily a spending issue. And that's why I focus so much on habits, because money comes and goes. Everybody understands how money works. You get it, you spend it. But the behaviors behind it is what we're altering. If things, and then you started identifying things that can be eliminated. So when we were going through her budget, we saw that she had cable, and she's like, well, I'm really barely home. Like, okay, so if you're barely home, we can get rid of cable because you also have Hulu and you're fine with using Hulu. So that's $100 that we can save, things that can be eliminated. And so having these type of conversations and just helping them to understand that just because it looks like this falls under the checklist of what society says you should have, do you really need it? Because I think that's one of the biggest issues, is that we feel a little incompetent sometimes if we don't have something that society says we should have. Like, we should have a TV, we should have cable, we should have internet. Like, if you are out of your house the majority of the day and you have a hotspot on your phone, and when you're out and about you're using your hotspot, or you're at a coffee shop, do you really need the internet at home while you're sleeping? Like, so it's just things like that that you can go through and kind of filter out to be able to understand what type of spending can be cut or can be reduced or can be eliminated. um and just again remembering that this is a sensitive subject. And so, what does that end up looking like is this. If you write down that television is an issue, okay, maybe they don't want to get rid of their TV because they're like, there are some times where I just want to binge watch. Okay, well, how about you call your provider and find a lower plan? Same thing with the internet, same thing with the phone and your cell phone. I will say I kept trying to figure out what they meant by lifeline. So I'm just gonna assume that means that that's supposed to be a home phone. Because I have searched everywhere to figure out what they meant by lifeline. So just in case you're reading this screen. But after you are writing these things down, as I said, you let the client decide. You can talk through the pros and cons with them, but after you give them the information, it's ultimately up to them to make the decision. So all you can do is present the case and ask them, what do you feel comfortable with? If they feel comfortable with being able to do these things, then they can move forward with it, and then they'll have a savings. Um, and so you just make sure that you're always using positive words, that you also, I would say, as I said, um, implementing some type of reward system, to where if they do call their television provider and they're like, hey, I was able to lower my bill by $80 because I was a lifelong customer and all of this other stuff, at least they get it, like, you're congratulating them and you're like, yes, we're one step further. So those are the type of things that I would be continuing to do. And like I said, being able to just help them through this process. So what does this look like for you all? So if you have 10 minutes with the client, then go over the spending tracker. Show them how to track the money that they're spending so they can see where it's actually going. If you have 30 minutes with them, go over the bill pay plan, strategies for expenses, and prioritizing bills. And if you have multiple sessions, you can go over all the tools in this module to be able to help them get a handle on not only their spending, but what expenses they really do have and how to prioritize bills. And to tie all three of these modules together, you have going over savings. They're all intertwined. You have your savings, you have your income, and you have your expenses. In order for you to be able to save, you need to understand the income that's coming in. If you're maximizing that opportunity, then you need to understand if the spending, if you're maximizing or minimizing, whichever way you want to call it, if you're minimizing your expenses to where you have the money to be able to save. So all three of these modules work hand in hand. How you attack it or how you go about approaching it would depend on the client that you're working with. If you have a client that has a spending habit, then maybe you start with the spending first. Or maybe you start with the income first if you want them to see, look, you have the money, but you can start with spending first to let them see what they're spending, then start with income to have them see what they actually have coming in so they can see that they have the money to be able to save to reach their goal. So it just depends on what type of client you're working with, what their situation is. And as I said in the first session, all of these modules, I really love them because you don't have to do it in order. This is not a one size fits all situation. So you are allowed to put your own puzzle pieces together to make it the best situation for your participants or your clients. Does anyone have any questions, um, or anything they want me to elaborate on that we've talked about, that I've gone over today?
I have a quick question. Um,
Yes.
are there, um, I'm trying to think, a list of resources again where if we had someone at St. Anna's Food Distribution Ministry that comes, we have 25 families we service every month, and like where we could refer them to someone. I know personally, I probably don't have a calling to do this type of training or providing assistance, but
Uh-huh.
is that we would be able to say, hey, if you're looking to try to work on your budget and so forth, or create a budget if you don't have one, we know some people that could help you out. And just because we try to look for any kind of resources that we can give them every month when we meet. We do a lot of
Okay.
healthcare things, like we know that they have diabetes. We have suggested menus for them and so forth. But this would be another little thing to put in front of them.
So I'll speak from my perspective, and then I'll let Ashley speak to see if she has any other suggestions for on resources. But the purpose of the nonprofit that I have is to do exactly that. So I partner with different organizations to actually bring this education to their participants, whether whether we're meeting with the participants one-on-one, or we're coming there and setting up a workshop for you to be able to provide this assistance to your participants. And as I stated in the first session, just make sure who you're partnering with, because all of these resources I provide are free. I never want cost to ever be a barrier for someone to reach their financial potential. So that is an option that I have for you if you would be interested in that. But like as I said, Ashley might have additional resources, because I always tell people at least have 3 under your belt. But I'm not entirely sure of any organizations in New Orleans that have a pure concentration on financial education and financial literacy, which was the reason I started this.
Thank you very much.
And so
No
I
problem.
know that so at one point Crescent Care, the new one on Elysian Fields, so CFPB has financial counselors that are housed in like every state or just about every state that can provide financial counseling for free for families that are below the poverty line. So the new Crescent Care location at 1631 Elysian Fields, they're supposed to have a CFPB financial coach there to assist families. When I checked about a month ago, the guy I spoke with said that he was leaving soon, but I don't know if that meant that the program itself would be coming to a close as well. So it will be worth reaching out to Crescent Care to see if they're still offering the CFPB financial coaching services. And again, those are free. So like all the materials we're going over here with Lori, there is someone who works with CFPB specifically that this toolkit is pulled from that is supposed to be assisting with this stuff. So again, that's Crescent Care on Elysian Fields.
Right, and I have a contact Noel over there, and definitely I'll check with him on that. Thank you.
Yep.
This is Lizzie from the Advocacy Center. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, I wanted to let you know, so there are a few different organizations that are starting to do financial coaching services, but everybody has pretty specific eligibility criteria. So we're one of them. We're going to be doing financial coaching services and case management for formerly incarcerated people with disabilities. So if you come across anyone who meets that criteria, we could be a resource for that. And then we recently joined a cohort through the Greater New Orleans Foundation and the Financial Clinic. And there are 4 other organizations that are learning financial coaching strategies, and that is Kingsley House, the New Orleans Women and Children's Shelter, the First 72 Plus, and Jericho Road. And all of them have different focuses. But if it would be helpful, I could reach out to each of them and ask if they could give me just kind of a profile of who they can serve in that specific capacity, and I could just share that with the group.
That would be fantastic. I can also post that to the end of the website where you guys are accessing the webinars as an additional resource. That would be great.
That'd be
all right, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So if no one has any more questions, I thank you all for sitting through this, and I hope it wasn't too boring.
That was great.
It was very good.
Thank you.
It was great. Thank you.
No problem.